Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Coach's Corner on the Fitter and Faster Swim platform. As always, I'm your host, Mike Murray. Today, we are thrilled to introduce you to the CEO and head coach of Nutria Aquatics, Alexis Keto. Over her 20-plus years of coaching, Alexis has had the good fortune of coaching at every level of the sport: summer league, high school, club, and college. Her 12 years in Colorado, she grew the team from 4 state qualifiers to 75 state qualifiers, 40-plus sectional qualifiers, multiple state record holders, junior national, USA Swimming National qualifiers, and Olympic trial qualifying athletes. Tradition of excellence that Coach Keto brings with her to Nutria Aquatics was with World Championship trials and senior national finalists. Coach Keto also has extensive experience working at the NCAA level with top programs like NC State, Go Pack, and Northwestern. And I want to let our viewers know today that if you stay to the end of the webcast with Coach Keto, we're going to be giving away one free Carbon Core FX racing suit from Arena. So stick around, and our sponsor will be giving away one free Carbon Core racing suit. So with that, I'm keeping it moving like we did last week with Coach Urbanchek, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Alexis Keto. Welcome to the Coach's Corner. You guys are back, first day back in the water. Are you pumped up or what?
Yep. I mean, it's technically first day long course, so we're doing good. You can take a little shot back there. Yep, we're going. We're hoping we don't get lightninged out today, because that would be the luck that we would have. But yeah. We are mid-practice. We're about ready to transition between workouts. So I will have to mask up here in a second because kids will be walking by. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So the whole staff, while on deck at practice, will be in PPE, correct?
When the kids are on deck, they are masked up, and then we're masked up. Once the kids are in the water, we're able to maintain at least 10 to 12 feet at this facility. So we unmask at that point. But that's it pretty much. For the most part, we're in a mask. And so when the kids transition in the next group, I do have to mask up for that. So, yeah.
Well, that's a great example for all the clubs that are just getting back and getting started again with their programs and getting practice going again. Can you talk really quickly about how long did it take you guys at Nutria to develop your reopening plan?
Well, it changed a lot as we went through the different iterations of what we could and couldn't do with the state. But it probably took us about a month to develop exactly how it was going to work, especially working with a couple of different facilities, because each facility is unique in how they want to run things.
Right. Absolutely. And you guys are at what pool?
So this is a Centennial Family Aquatic Center. Let's see if I can. If you look this way, we have our kids, they have their stuff stationed about 6 to 10 feet apart on that side. And then we've got 4 groups. So there's another one that's set up kind of down there. You can kind of see the green cones. And then we've got 2 on either side, 1 over there and then 1 over there as well. So they've got 4 stations of 10. We're only allowed to have 10 kids per group. And then the groups have to maintain a distance of 30 feet apart. So.
Oh, wow. So you're even planning for that group distance as they transition.
Yep. So everything is 30 feet apart. Yep.
How did you communicate some of the protocols and policies and procedures to your membership before getting to practice?
All of our athletes and parents have to go through an online training with Zoom. That's been one of the great things with Zoom, is they have an online training as well as a series of waivers that they have to fill out in order for their athletes to participate in workout. You can kind of see we've got 2 groups going in right now, or one of our senior groups and then one of our junior groups. And so we kind of talked as a coaching staff about who's doing what and making sure that the groups stay separate during the duration of the whole workout. They're in for 75 minutes right now for long course. And the rest of our team is going to be coming on board next week when we get to the next phase in our state. And so we're looking forward to that.
That's really great. And I think it's great for the coaches who are on this and maybe some parents who are watching to understand that we're not going blind into the new normal. We have so many different things that we have to plan for. When you panned your camera around and we saw the distancing between where the athletes had their equipment bags, did you mark that off? Did you create maps?
Yep. So there are little cones and X's. You can see kind of like right there, and then right there. There's tape on the ground and then a cone on there so the kids know where their area is. So yeah, and we've got
Okay.
that for each of the 4 areas. And then there's tape on each of the blocks where they put their stuff, so they know where to put it
Wow.
each place. Yeah.
A lot of planning. We had to do the same. We're back swimming in a lake. We start in the pool on Wednesday, but even with open water, you have so many safety policies and procedures for open water to begin with, but then to layer social distancing on top of it, it was quite a
Yeah,
feat.
we thought about that and we opted not to do that because of the risk ratio. We just decided our team is so big, we couldn't just put a small group in and then like have to retrain. And open water swimming, Lake Michigan is not exactly like swimming in a little lake. Lake Michigan's kind of like swimming in the ocean. And so there's a big safety issue regarding that. And so it was just easier to kind of wait until we could get on board, and our facilities assured us that they would do everything they could to work with us. And they've been a great partner in our community to make that happen. So we were lucky.
That's terrific. I want to jump right into this because I've been so excited to talk to you about this topic. And I think a good segue into talking about mental training and developing championship level mindset is, what advice do you think you have for coaches right now after experiencing the shutdown and going through this pandemic? What do you think are some of the most important lessons that we can learn as coaches and share with our athletes?
The biggest is take care of your own mental health. That's a big piece of it. We've been talking a lot about on our coaching staff. We're really lucky in that part of our health package includes free mental health services online. And so we've been talking in our staff about like really taking advantage of that and having an opportunity to talk with a mental health professional, because different people handle things differently. And that's been important for our coaches to address. And being open with our athletes about it is a big piece of that. And then also just recognizing that our time with the athletes is really important. And so when we do have our Zoom meetings, to try to really make sure you're talking to them, say something to them. Like, we're not just having a Zoom dry land and everybody just does whatever. And we're just kind of like, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. We really try to talk to every single athlete every day, multiple times, and give them feedback, commentary, and be kind to them in that space, because our kids were in school until like the second week of June. So they were online school. And so there was a lot of Zoom fatigue that we had to deal with. And that was really hard. The other piece that's really been hard is watching other teams go live on social media. And when you're not able to do that, it's hard. And it's hard as a coach, and it's really hard as a kid, because you feel like you're losing some ground to your competition, whether or not they're actually your competition or not. It might be some team out in Montana that's getting in the water, and you're like, man, I really wish I was in the water. That's another person that's in the water and I'm not in the water. And you feel like that's not fair. And realizing that your kids are feeling the same way is important, and recognizing that. I think it's hard to lose your meets. It was hard to lose the meets in March, but now it's the opposite. Like, adding meets causes a lot of anxiety for my athletes right now, because they're not feeling like they're not going to be ready for that, and they're going to miss out on that, and feel like they're lost a lot of lost opportunity. I don't know if you feel this way, but I know my junior athletes, my rising juniors, my sophomores who are rising juniors, and we're starting to talk about that college recruiting process, really felt like they lost out like in March big time. And now they feel really left behind, because for a lot of kids, that sophomore year is so crucial. And this as a coach, that sophomore year is a big development piece, especially for, okay, I do have to mask up because my kids are coming in. So hang on. Sorry, it's a unicorn. If anybody who knows me, it's not really a surprise.
I had a feeling that you would have a custom type of mask.
Yes, it definitely is. But yeah, my kids are coming in, so yep. So hopefully you can still hear me a little bit. But yeah, so that's the big thing, is that realize that your kids have now flipped, where they felt like they lost something. Now they're anxious about getting back in the pool and not being fast anymore, and being compared to that is really hard for them, because they feel like if I go and swim now, colleges aren't going to recruit me because I'm not going to be fast anymore. And it's realizing that it's a part of the process. We're going to take some time, think about the season as a little longer, and it's going to be okay.
I think you speak to a lot of the same fears that I've been dealing with here. Obviously, New York was a totally different scenario than a lot of places. our timetable was a lot different than other places. And for me, you're right, as a coach, it was hard to quantify how long is it going to take for us to get back. And in doing that, our athletes were feeling very, very similarly. And especially with the college recruiting process, the number one question and concern that I got initially when we were first shut down in March was speaking exactly to that. What about my recruitability? Because I've lost this whole season. And then in my own children, considering redshirting in college and, making a decision to maybe go pro or stay another year, all of those things have really weighed heavily on our athletes. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I actually had this as my 7th bullet point today, but we're right in. So I want to ask you, so, we did a wellness check-in, I called it, during our dryland. So every Wednesday, we had dryland every day, but every Wednesday on Zoom, we just talked to the kids and let them talk. And I never did that on deck in person before, and it's absolutely something that's going to carry over. Is that something that was always a part of your coaching style, to kind of check in with your athletes, see how they're doing in maybe a non-swimming related way?
Yeah, we talk a lot on the deck. I mean, our practices are usually pretty short. Even when we're back in the pool, they're 75 minutes to 90 minutes. So during practice itself, we don't always have time for that. But
Right.
the kids know that they are able to come and talk to us whenever, and they make use of that. We talk a lot in dry land. That's usually one place where we have space to actually talk. So we've been encouraging them to continue that conversation. I did one-on-one check-ins. We've done 2 now with each of the athletes. We're going to start a 3rd probably at the end of June, once we've been swimming for a little while, and see where everybody's at. My college seniors really have been struggling a lot. I don't know if you've seen that as well. My high school seniors, because they lost this. Some of them are fine. Some of them were like, it's not a big deal. But then I do have a fair number that we have a lot of traditions at our high schools, and them not being able to participate in that has been tough for a number of them. And so we've been trying to mitigate that and get them excited about the next piece for their career, because they might not go back, and we've talked about that possibility. Some of them might go back, some of them might not go back. And that's been an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah, we're dealing with that in our house right now and on our team. There's just so much uncertainty. So I think whatever we can do to provide them some avenues to communicate about that is really vitally important. What are some of the things that you guys did at New Trier over the course of the quarantine to keep your athletes engaged?
We've had to mix it up. We had a lot of guest speakers initially for the first 2 months, where we had a lot of guest speakers from Olympians to national team members to even just former athletes, talking about their experiences and what they're doing during this time. We also had some family trivia nights for our younger athletes and families, some family team trivia, which is really fun. But now it's just everybody's starting to kind of fall into a rhythm and a pattern. And so we're back into kind of a more normal feeling summer, even though it's going to be a little bit truncated with this, but that's okay.
Sure. So now we're going to jump right into mental training. So when we think about what it might mean, and you and I both have thoughts about this term, what it means to have that bulletproof mindset, is that just an esoteric term, or is there a way to develop an athlete to achieve that type of control over their mindfulness? And how do we help our athletes achieve the goal of having a strong approach to challenges that they're going to face?
I think that's a hard question, because I think there's a lot of, you want to think that they're going to be able to handle that. But one of the big issues is, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is that idea of social media, and how they feel like they're missing out if they don't do certain things, if they're not able to go out and have a quote unquote normal existence as a high schooler, whatever that might be in their social circle. And it's important to kind of recognize that. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure that our transitions are working smoothly.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
It's called the Coach's Corner for a reason.
Yeah. So you get we've got some people that are just kind of wandering through an easy 50 here, because we're transitioning to group 2 right now, and it's the first day they've done it, so we have to make sure they do it right. But I think a big piece of it is the social media. really helping them understand that it's not what you see on social media for somebody is not reality. Everybody puts like their best foot forward for the most part, or sometimes they put their worst foot forward. You know, there's a level of extremes that happens in that social media setting, and not to take that personally is important. And that's hard. It's hard as a teenager. It's hard as an adult. I mean, I know that, you know, I see my friends post their great pictures of their families and hanging out and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I mean, I don't have kids or anything like that, but you know, there's something that's cool about that. And I do get a little jealous, you know, from time to time. And then I have to realize that I'm in my space and I'm happy in my space. And there's things that I have, they're probably jealous about. The fact that I can take a nap in the middle of the day because I don't have kids, you know, things like that. So there's definitely some movement there that's probably, you know, a level of everybody wishes the grass is always greener, you know, that kind of thing. So talking with your kids about that is really important. We talk a lot about what you're putting on social media and how to interpret it. Because a lot of times, again, like with the college signing, that's one of the big ways where you see a lot of it. I'm sure you do too. When all the kids start signing and they start putting it out there, and then it's like, oh, I need to sign, I need to sign, I need to sign. Well, have you found a school you want to go to yet? No? Okay, that's okay. Then let's wait. And that's okay. It's okay. Like you're in your time and in your space. And we spend a lot of time with that, especially in our yoga. We do a lot of yoga with my team. And that's one of the things we reiterate in our yoga classes and our yoga practice is that you need to be present in your moment and work to embrace and understand the beauty of the moment that you're in. And that's hard. It's hard for it's hard for an adult. I can only imagine how hard it is for a teenager when, you know, somebody can send you a Snapchat that disappears in like a little bit and you don't know who else saw it. And gosh, that sucks. Like, I don't think any of us that are in our age bracket would ever want to go back to middle school now. That would be like a disaster. Yeah, that'd be so hard. But recognizing that our athletes are in that is important.
I'm glad you talked about that because I think the first part of mental training for our athletes happens with the environment that we create at practice and within our program. I think in order to start becoming more mentally resilient, you have to feel safe, you have to feel included. So what are some of the things that you're doing at New Trier to ensure that there is an environment of inclusiveness? That might be, you know, something that's incredibly difficult to achieve every day. And how are they feeling like they're a part of the team?
That's a huge question. Inclusivity is a very difficult question, especially right now. I mean, you're talking about there's a lot of social difficulty going on right now, as well as, you know, it's the middle of Pride Month. It's, you know, there's a lot of things where inclusivity is a very broad conversation where we're talking about how do you make a kid feel included? Well, you have to meet them in their space, and each kid is going to have a different space and a different story to come to you with. And how you did things or how things were done when you were a kid are not necessarily valid right now. Oh, if you want to see departure, there's a departure. We're leaving like 6 feet apart with masks.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and they have to stay away, and our coaches are supervising and getting them out. So, sorry.
That's a great live look in.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm going to take off my mask now because my second group is in the water and the first group is left. So
I want you to reiterate what you just said, because I try to get one great quote. You've had several already. You have to meet each athlete in their space. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So every athlete is coming to you from a different background. You know, just because what you did as a coach or what you did as an athlete or what you listened to somebody else talk about, that's not where your athletes necessarily are coming from. And recognizing that, I think some of the most dangerous words that we can use is, this is how we've always done it. And that's something that precludes inclusivity because of that. And I think the recent events in our communities, collective community, identifies that, you know, that the way we've always done it doesn't always work. And it's applicable not just in society, but I think it's also applicable in how we run practices, how we run our meets, how we run our, and I think that this pandemic has shown us that we're going to have to think differently, and we're going to have to think radically differently. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to challenge us, and it's going to push a lot of coaches to a very uncomfortable place. And part of that is being vulnerable to your athletes and understanding that even though you may only have an hour of practice time, if you know where your athletes are coming from and what their goals are, you can meet them where they're at and make them successful. And you can help them understand whether you've got a kid that likes to just grind. If you know that that kid likes to just throw down 3, 4, 5, 400s over and over again, and that's how they thrive, you're going to have to figure out how to integrate that in the same space as a kid who, if you did that to them, you damage them irreparably. Wow, irreparably. Sorry.
I've done that. I've actually done that. I've done that before.
Yeah, where I think every coach has done that, where you've accidentally, or with good intention,
right,
made an athlete work outside of their comfort zone to the point where it's not a one size fits all protocol. And I think this is going to push us to realize that, like, that old model of doubles. I grew up in an era where you did doubles every day. You swam 20, 30,000 yards, as much as you possibly could. The more you did, the faster you did it, the better you were, and the faster you were going to get. And that worked then, and my coaches bought into it. And I think that was really important. And I think, but at the same time, like, then I changed and got hurt and had to work in a different way and figure out a different way to work things, and grew that way. And I've also learned through master's coaching that you don't have to do that to be fast. And my college swimmers from NC State would probably cry if they ever heard me say that. I don't know if you necessarily need to go $8,000 a workout to be a good miler. And I'm sorry if any of them listen to this at any point in time, because that's something we would do. I would do 800s, and we'd do it long course, and it'd be on 9:30, and we'd crank it out and grind. Like, that was a normal set that I would write as a coach. And now it's like, I have 75 minutes. Oh my gosh, that's so long. How am I going to fill that?
Right. No, I really appreciate that perspective. And I think we've all been in that scenario before. But the idea that you have to meet each athlete in their space on any given day, I think, is so important. Can you discuss, even though we're speaking specifically about mental training and mental preparation, we're also speaking a lot to emotional intelligence and emotional well-being. We've touched on that a little bit, but I think mental training is a way to help our athletes improve their emotional intelligence, improve their emotional awareness, and create a better sense of how they're feeling in the moment. Can you talk about that a little bit? Sure.
I think the first thing is to realize as coaches that we don't know how to do that. I think I would love to say that I can to help an athlete 100%. I think that the type of athletes that we're getting now in the space that we're meeting them in is far more complex than we're comfortable in. I don't understand social media all the way. I'm lucky if I'm very proud of myself for understanding how a story works on Instagram and that, but I don't understand the social ramifications of that. The social ramifications of a social media set is something that I don't totally understand. And that is something that if you ask athletes, that piece is a lot more important than it ever was for us as coaches. And we can't negate that. We can't negate that piece and how that affects them mentally and how that affects them emotionally. When you talk about emotional intelligence, what feels permanent to them is something that feels very impermanent to us as coaches, because we're like, oh, it's social media, whatever. And like 2 days, it's not going to be a big deal. But for them, it is. And recognizing that and being cognizant of that is important. Researching social media, being ignorant on that is, I think, not really the wisest thing we can do. Even if you don't use it, and I have a lot of friends that don't use social media. Even if you don't use it, you need to understand that it is important for your athletes. Like we did a group, they did a 3-point entry, and they were like, oh, is it going to be on Instagram? Will you tag us? Like, That's really
Going on the
important to
gram.
them. They want to be on the gram, and it's really important to them. And recognizing that is important as coaches. And and I know I'm not 100% equipped to do that. So a lot of my athletes, we do seek out local partners that are better at that than I am. And we also seek out people to come in and do guest talks with them, because it does help them to feel like, as interconnected as social media is, it's also very isolating. And so they can feel very alone at the same time that they feel that they're feeling included at the same time. And I know that makes like no sense whatsoever, but that's 100% it for them. And I want them to feel like they're included. You talk about inclusivity. It was interesting. So we had a dry land, I'll do a little anecdote here. We had a dry land program that we used for a little while that was all based on like digital. Like it was it was great. Like the actual programming was really great and we did really well on it. It was very successful. But at the end of the season, the kids came and said they didn't like doing it because they felt like it was too impersonal, because they couldn't interact with each other. And that was one of the few times they felt like they could. And so they wanted to do away with that. Okay, there's some thunder. Okay, we're going to just pretend. No, I'm kidding. There's no lightning yet. We're okay. But that's one of those things where we really focus on, the kids were recognizing that impersonal piece wasn't valuable to them and that they wanted to have something that was more interactive. They didn't mind the programming. That wasn't the issue. What they didn't like was the medium that it was presented. And I was surprised about that, because I thought for sure that they would be much happier with something that was on their phones, because they're on their phones all the time. That makes sense. But it's not. They feel there's so much in that in other ways. They recognize that it was important for them to be in person in dry land and spend time interacting on that end. Hang on 2 seconds.
No problem. And for those of you who are watching, Alexis is live from her practice, so there's a lot of
Sorry
coordination.
about that. It's our first outdoor practice, our first practice back. We're having to make some judgment calls here in a second. So anyway, so that's kind of, it was interesting to have my athletes make the choice that they wanted to be more personal and more interactive with each other. So they may like Fortnite, they may like all those things, but they also like being around each other. And I think that's taught them this too. So.
Absolutely. So what does mental training look like at Nutrier? Do you have a name for it? Are the kids aware of what the name is? Is it something that we touch on every day? Is it something you do weekly? How's it set up?
Well, you'll be disappointed. We don't do anything like that. We only have 90 minutes in the water. We have only 90 minutes scheduled for practice. We do some goal setting throughout the year. They do one-on-one goal meetings throughout the year. And that's really kind of where we sit with it. I check in with each athlete. It's on me to do that. We don't really do standard visualization. We focus a lot on breathing in our yoga. That's one of the things we do, a lot of centering in our yoga and focusing on that. So we do yoga twice a week. So that's probably about the closest thing to mental training. Yeah, we have two yoga instructors on staff, full-time as staff employees. So we put a high value on that because that does allow them to learn how to be in touch with themselves and in touch with their breathing, their conscientiousness. And we talk a lot about how to use that and translate that over to practice and then to meets. But in terms of like strict mental training, the athletes that I have that have difficulty with that, we actually refer them out to professionals because that's something that is, I don't want to tell a kid something wrong. And having somebody who's got a degree in this, I have 2 English degrees. I've done a lot of reading on philosophy, but I am and mental training and things like that, so that I focus on that. But by no stretch of the imagination am I somebody that is an expert on mental training, whereas there are people in our community that are. And so I'd rather rely on that resource if an athlete can do that. If not, we talk a lot of, we do, like I said, we do a lot of that in our yoga practice, and we do a lot of that in our just in our day-to-day practice, it's like, okay, visualize what this is going to look like. How do you want this to feel? We talk a lot about feeling in practice. Again, we focused on quality over quantity. So when we're talking about workouts, we focus on replicating in practice what we want to have happen in the meet. A very smart coach once told me that time is time. So if you're trying to go fast at the end of the season, go fast in practice. And it sounds really simple, but a lot of times I think we get caught in like trying to do pace +1 or pace -1 or things like that. Just go pace and go fast and train your body to feel comfortable in that. All right, hang on just a second. It looks like we're clearing.
So first practice back, and they got a passing thunderstorm as they're trying to coordinate all of the new regulations and guidelines having to go with social media. So, and Alexis is managing Coach's Corner all at the same time. So there's a lot happening at New Trier today. It's a busy day in Illinois. So we're going to let her finish this. Oh, you got to turn your mic back on. There you
go. This is probably the only time kids are upset that they're getting thundered out because it was their first one back. So let's make a record that they all kind of were like, oh,
yeah,
and bummed, but because now they have to leave and they're done. So,
right.
Oh, 20 minutes. So are we putting them? Okay.
Well, that's good. You still get to swim. That's huge. Alexis, when you guys, I'll wait till you finish. Not a big deal.
All right, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I love seeing you do your thing.
They solved it. Fine.
When you guys are doing your yoga, your coaches, that's such a great resource that they're on your staff.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing a huge increase in flexibility and or comfortability with themselves after the yoga sessions? Are you seeing that the athletes really enjoy that time and look forward to doing it?
Actually, no, they don't initially. It actually is a hard sell, especially as a regular thing. We do see kids not enjoy it because it does put them in a vulnerable position. We do ask them to think about their feelings and what they're thinking and that kind of stuff. And that's something that a lot of kids aren't comfortable with. So no, they're not super excited about it. They don't really embrace it initially. It usually takes about a year, actually, for kids to really buy into it and see the results. We have a really big guy. He actually just got out of the water, but he used to not be able to touch his toes. And so one of the things that he wanted to do was have a better start, a better turn. And we talked about how flexibility was really important. And so this last 2.5 months, he's actually gone from not being able to touch his toes to be able to put his hands on the ground. His vertical is increased. He's more connected in the water. Just in a couple of practices we have had that he's back in, it just looks better because he hasn't been able to lift. Like all our weight room access is closed, so he can't lift heavy. He can't bulk up. Which we've been really happy with. And the yoga has been a big part of that. So, and that's helped them a lot. Yoga, actually, I will say yoga during this time has been invaluable.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And do you talk to the athletes during the yoga session about, not being afraid to talk about maybe some of their fears or some of the concerns that they might be having in school or things like that?
Yeah, we so sometimes we do an exercise about once a quarter where we give them 3 note cards, and on one note card they have to write something that's scaring them right now, something that and then one note card is something they're proud of, and the third one is something I wish my coaches knew. And sometimes it's like silly stuff, but sometimes it's serious, like I wish they knew that my dog was going to die. I wish they knew that I'm worried about whether or not my parents can afford for me to go to college, and stuff like that are really serious, and they're anonymous. And it's one of those things that at the end of the series, we kind of talk a little bit about some of the things people are proud of as a group, but then we're like, if there's anything that you've written down that you'd really like to talk about with the coaches, you can set up some time for that. And so that kind of gives them an opening to talk about some of the harder stuff that they have to go through.
So those, I'm writing those down as something that they're scared of, something you wish your coaches knew. What was the other one?
Something that you're proud of, because we don't spend enough time Sometimes celebrating that and understanding that you're proud of something. And so we talk a little bit about that. Like we talk a little bit about recognizing the space we're in, because oftentimes, and again, another thing that we forget as coaches is this is the only time that they're going to be positive during the day, is when they come and see us at the pool. Like somebody's probably gotten mad at them at school, or they've had a bad grade. Their parents have probably yelled at them that day, or maybe not had the best interaction because they only have a small amount of time for interaction. But that's something that we've got to give them an opportunity to feel good about themselves. Every now and then, we focus a lot on gratitude on our team. We really spend a lot of time in that space to try to keep a positive outlook on things. Is like trying to find that grateful space.
I'm really interested in that space, and you touched on something there that I think is really important when we think about mental training or teaching our athletes to be more mindful of things. I think it's important, and you mentioned it, to realize that we're often getting them at the end of their day. So you're absolutely right. There is a space of time where they've been experiencing a vast array of emotions, joy, anger, pain, all of those things. I think it's our job to really make sure that we are grateful as a staff to have them at practice.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest things that was so hard for me as a young coach to wrap my head around was letting go of my obsession with attendance. You want perfect attendance all the time, but there are days where you need to take a day off, man. You need to go home. You need to just be in your own space and figure some things out. And we're here for you tomorrow, regardless. Talk about how you establish that feeling of gratefulness that Nutrier.
So we do a couple of different exercises throughout the year with that. And I guess maybe this could be considered mental health if you focus on that piece. Sometimes it's just as simple as I'll write a prompt on the whiteboard, and before they leave practice, they have to write something on there, whether it's what are you thankful for today, or it's like what are you excited about today, anything along those lines. And then they have kids really like multicolored expo markers. If you don't know this already, make sure you have a lot readily available, and they get to write in whatever color they want and write up there, and it's like they're like it's like a gravitational force to those colored markers. And so we use it for positive rather than having them write like whatever or doodle on the board. They actually have some purpose and some direction with that. And then when we talk about during the year, each of my older groups have to spend time writing thank yous to the volunteers on our team, because I think it's important that they understand that what we are is not just because of the teams, the coaches and the athletes, but also because of the parents that take the time to give of their program, of themselves. And many of our parents don't even have kids on the team anymore, and they still volunteer, which is pretty awesome. So
that's a sign of great culture.
Yeah, I mean, well, Nutrier is a unique culture, and it's bigger than me. It's bigger than any of the coaches. That's a big. The level of tradition here is unlike anything else. We were the very first high school swim meet in the country, was Nutrier versus Evanston, and it's actually a pretty big deal here, swimming. And it's cool to be part of a culture that swimming has such a high priority and such a deep history and rich history in one, 10-mile radius, probably.
Right.
And I'm very lucky to be a part of it. I have very little to do with that tradition. I'm just happy to carry it on. And that's the best part. And the kids are too. And so we talk a lot about being grateful for that tradition. I mean, you see people come, and like they had the 100th anniversary of the first high school meet this year, or last January. And people came from years and years and years back to watch this meet of men's swimming. And it was really neat to kind of talk with them. And it holds a very special place in a lot of people's hearts. It's one of the few teams where when you walk around in airports around the world, where people will come up and be like, I know somebody who swam at Nutrier. I know somebody who went there. I mean, like I've been in airports in Texas and Montana and South Dakota, and somebody random will come up and be like, hey, my aunt swam at Nutrier. My grandfather swam at Nutrier. Are you from there? And that's unlike pretty much anywhere else in the world. I've been doing this for a really long time, and North Carolina has a very rich swimming history as well. but it's nothing like this. That the high school has really created an amazing dynamic in the high school environment here, and then we just continue that in our outreach of that, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, there's a certain thing that goes with the mental training side of that when the athletes realize the importance and the significance of legacy and tradition, right? There's an expectation for success. And that's a double-edged sword in and of itself, right? When we have expectations, we have a lot of anxiety about expectations. And a lot of times expectations also motivate us to want to play a role in the rich history of our culture. Can you talk about maybe how you use those push-pull factors with your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that high school here becomes very important, and honoring and respecting that tradition is a big piece of what makes us successful as a team. And there's always space where we can improve on that. You know, I think there's always space where we can work to try to get a better connection with that, have our younger kids be involved with that, and cheer a little bit more. And you know, just be a part of that connection. So we do a lot of those kind of things, and really I work a lot with the high school coaches. I have a pretty good relationship with them. Matt Guy and Josh Runkle and Mike Hengelman and Greg Hartman are the 4 coaches that I work with, and they do a great job of communicating what their goals are, and we try our best as a program to help them with that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so important, and it's an issue that we struggle with in New York a little bit. But I think it's our job to work together for the best interest of the athlete. We have athletes on our club that are so motivated by high school, and we have athletes who are much more motivated to go to junior nationals. But we have to work within their space. So talk about why it's so important for you to create those relationships with the high school staff so that the athletes, from a mental and emotional standpoint, feel supported.
Well, it's important to understand that one does not need to be mutually exclusive from the other. Like, just because you want to be good at high school doesn't mean you can't be good at club, and vice versa. And when they see us working together as coaches, they feel a lot more like they're being taken care of as individuals, and that's really important for them. Is that they need to feel like they are, in fact, their goals are important, whether it's like I have a young woman who her goal is to win high school state, but she also wants to swim fast at Olympic trials. Those are not mutually exclusive things. And it doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. They can have equal importance. They're just at different points of the season, and there's different ways that we prepare for them. And, you know, and you just cross the bridge when you come to it. There's an element where, yes, we want to do a 5-year plan. Yes, we want to do these kind of longer plans, but at the end of the day, it's about where the kid is. And you might have a kid that the most important thing for them is to final at high school state, and you're not going to change their mind, and they're not going to care how they do in club swimming. And you, as a coach, you just, as much as you're like, man, if this kid just bought in a little more, it's okay. It's okay. And that's something that I didn't learn here. It's actually, I learned that in Colorado. Like that was something that I had a number of kids in Colorado where we had to sit down and figure out what was really important to them. And when we really sat and talked about it, we realized that, oh, you know, you don't want to swim in college because you want to do these other things that are equally exciting and important and wonderful. And that's okay too. Sure. And then it's always surprising. I don't know if you feel this way, but it's always surprising with who becomes a swim coach later in their career as a swimmer. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and it always cracks me up when I see a kid that I'm like, you are not the person I thought was going to be a swim coach out of this group of people, but there you are. And they're like so bought in, and they're so excited, and they just have a love for it. It's been really cool to kind of see that develop as I've been going through this career.
I often find that the athletes who go on to be swim coaches were some of the best teammates. You know, they had a love for their teammates' success. And that pulls me right into our next question with, how do you see the athletes at New Trier supporting each other and helping develop that mental toughness to be resilient as a team, to step up when challenges are presented?
Well, we have something kind of cool here that we call accountability teams with my top group, where
Talk to me about the
they're
accountability team.
they are in groups of like three or four teams when their job is to just kind of support each other. And we started it last summer, where they were just partnered up, and their job was to just help take care of their accountability buddy, if you really must know. I don't know if I would call it cool. Like, very few things I do are cool, but having that partnership, they were responsible for making sure their accountability buddy had, like, at the swim meet, do they have water? Do they need anything between their races? And by pulling the pressure off of themselves and their performance and putting it onto their teammate, it was so much easier for them to become successful. And then we just continued that into this year. And, like, for example, our seniors, for their senior graduation week, their accountability team made like little goodie bags for them going into it and dropped off signs and like just checked in with them all week to make sure that they were having a good senior week. I don't know how that's going to evolve this summer. We'll see. I'm hopeful that we can go to more than 10 people in a workout sometime soon. That would be pretty awesome. But that's something that we've seen. It sounds a little cheesy, but it's kind of like Secret Psych, but all year round. Because everybody likes doing Secret Psychs and Secret Santas. So it's like, why does it have to be limited to a week when really it could be super helpful if we do it all year round and help people feel good about themselves outside of yourself?
That's amazing. And while you were talking about that, I was sounding out accountability buddy from my show notes. Mm-hmm. That's such a great idea. Now, do you and the staff work together to pair those athletes up, or do they?
Yeah, we talk a lot about like what characteristics would be helpful for each athlete. Again, when we talk about meeting people in their space, like if we know an athlete that gets particularly nervous before their races, we try to pair them with somebody who is generally pretty talkative and pretty courteous and is very willing to put themselves out there to talk and doesn't mind if somebody's really anxious and just needs to talk a whole lot. And they're going to be supportive and encouraging of that. And likewise, if we've got somebody who's pretty laid back, they need to probably be with somebody who's also laid back rather than somebody that's super intense that might drive up that intensity for them in an uncomfortable space.
Alexis, what are some of the strategies that you use as a coach to advise or encourage the athlete who might be having real race anxiety before what they perceive as a very important competition? How do we handle that better?
Actually, the person you should talk to, I feel like I'm like the Santa on Miracle on 34th Street right now, but you should talk to Peter Verhoef at Bulls. He has a phenomenal presentation about moving your average. And so rather than thinking about trying to go a best time all the time, you work on trying to move your average forward every time you race, because a lot of the anxiety is about going a best time. And usually that's something that I found comes from one of two places. It usually comes from that, like when you're talking about somebody who gets anxious before a race, it's because they feel like they're going to fail. And it's probably because the reaction they got very early on in their career when they did well was so positive, and when they did badly, it was, oh no, are you okay? And if you can mitigate that early on in your athlete's development, that's going to help a lot. You need to be as excited as you are for an Olympic trial. You need to be in kind of like in an even keel. Yes, you want to be excited when somebody makes Olympic trials, but at the same time, you also need to be excited when somebody does a flip turn for the first time, or when somebody, like, mitigate and understand where that excitement. If you are always up here as a coach or down here when they do bad, it's going to be very hard for them to understand what they're trying to do as an athlete. And I'm equally guilty of that. I will catch myself being upset when a kid has a bad swim and physically reacting that way, and recognize that the athlete sees that. If you look at the best coaches in the business, they have the same reaction whether an athlete wins or whether they lose, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And I think the more we can move that marker to that, the better. But again, have Peter come on and give his presentation on Move Your Average, because it's freaking amazing. We did a training trip down there, and he did a presentation for my athletes, and it hit them so hard. It was like our t-shirt quote for the next season. Like, that was something that they really bought into, and it meant a lot to them. because it took some pressure off of the swim. If you're thinking about just trying to make your average time better rather than that outline time better, you're going to be significantly more successful. And he does a much better job than I could ever do presenting it. But it's incredibly impactful, and I think it's something that coaches should hear as well as athletes, because you realize, like, where you as a coach have a lot of responsibility in that. Like, I think we as coaches are instinctively humble and want to, our reactions and our relationship with athletes is extremely significant to them. It's on par with their parents sometimes, because we're honestly going to see them. If you have 20 hours of practice or 12 hours of practice a week, that's more awake time than the parents get with their kids, especially at that high school level. And that is an impactful period of time. And if you show disappointment in their swim, they're going to feel that.
So you just
mine are back in. Okay, sorry.
You explained the first 5 years of my coaching career right there. Mm-hmm. Real excited when good things happen, almost negative when bad things happen. And it took a lot of that experience, right, to continue to progress and get better and develop as a coach. But don't get me wrong,
you still need to protest those relay false starts like your life depends on it. Believe me, I will politely go and ask for reevaluation of my relay starts and of a false start and of a DQ and things like that. But it's important for the athlete to see that you are their advocate and that you are standing up for their best interest rather than seeing what they did as a failure.
Absolutely. I think you touched on something there that I want to expand on, and what you were talking about was really self-awareness. Mm-hmm. So what strategies from a coach mental strengthening program are you doing in your life to maybe have that quick gut reaction when something's happening to say, wait, I got to be aware of where my mind is going right now. I got to reel it back in, and I need to be present in this moment.
I'm not great at that. Because you care about your athletes. And I think when you care about your athletes, that emotion shows. It's important to, when they come over and they're disappointed, not harping on that same disappointment. They're already beating themselves up about it. I will force them in. I'll say, okay, you've got to go warm down and you've got to come up with 3 things that you did well in that race. Just because you didn't go best time doesn't mean you didn't do things that were right. And that also gives me time to kind of like cultivate things that they did right. Because we've all seen the disaster race. Like we've all seen like the 200 fly where the last 25 is 35 strokes and vertical. And you feel bad for that kid. And I think empathy is really important as a coach. I think sometimes we forget what it's like to fail as an athlete, and recognizing that space of what that might feel like is important. Usually, like for me, if I'm going to ask them to do something, I think about, I mean, first off, I never write a practice that I wouldn't want to do myself anymore. I used to write like the hardest workout that I possibly could with as much yardage as on. Now I think about like, okay, what do I want to watch? What's going to be fun for me to coach? I don't want to coach anything that's going to be boring. I don't want to coach anything that I'm not going to be engaged in, because then they're not going to be excited about doing it either. Just as much as when we look at entries, I mean, there's something to be said for everybody swimming every event. I think that's really important at like 14 and underage. But as they get to high school, recognizing that part of your job is to keep them excited about the sport. And if you can't figure out a way to get them excited about swimming a 200 fly or 200 breaststroke, you might be banging your head against a wall. That being said, we do like one of the things that we do as a team is I say, okay, today we have one meet every season where we're all going to do a difficult event, whether it's we're all going to do the 400 IM or all going to do the 200 fly, and it's all just going to be tough. And those are the days that the 200 flyers don't have to do the 200 fly, and they're like, yay, we're going to cheer, and they're on cheer squad because they're not doing it, but they have to cheer for their teammates who are doing that event because it's hard.
Are you doing any staff development with this kind of stuff? Are you talking to your staff about the attitudes and philosophies that you want to have on deck every day. One thing that we started doing at Victor this year was my administrative team and our staff have been meeting with Jeff Raker, and Jeff is a phenomenal guy. He's a great, longtime official of USA Today, and he does these leadership academies, and a lot of it is about just becoming more self-aware as coaches. Are you doing anything in terms of staff development that way?
We've done a little bit. We really haven't done anything significant because, like I said earlier, our coaches have been doing almost like a full coaching schedule with all of our online Zooms and things like that, and just staying on top of communication with our team. We're a 600 to 700 person team usually, and we're sitting right around 400. And so we're having to really kind of stay with our team contact right now. But we've had guest speakers come in and talk with our coaches here and there in some of our staff meetings. And honestly, we just let staff kind of talk about where they're at and be comfortable with sharing their feelings in that environment. So, because that's been important.
Yeah.
And recognizing again when you're not feeling good and you're not happy and you're not like right now, it's like, are you comfortable coaching? We've got some coaches that don't feel super great about coming in and coaching. Okay, that's fine. Let's figure out a space where we can work with you and make this happen. And it's okay.
Right. You're absolutely right. And for the athletes and the staff to feel like, you are actively involved in helping them make positive lifestyle choices, I think is something that I've had to really improve in my own development as a coach. Because if it were up to me, we would be working as many hours as I work, and not everybody is comfortable doing that.
No.
But I think that's an important part of training your athletes too, is, you have a responsibility as a head coach, as a CEO, to have a staff that's excited to be in the workplace. And I've tried really hard to think about ways to engage our staff that way. They do such a great job anyhow, but I think that's an important part of mental training for the entire team. Alexis, in your experience, some of the elite level athletes that you've coached, what are some strategies that you've seen them employ, when they're faced with challenges, or when, they make that first big A final at night? I've always said that I'm going to write a book someday about swimming, and it's going to be called something like "What Happens When I Make My First A Final." There's just so much, I think, from an experience standpoint, that the athletes learn from that experience. What are the great athletes that you've coached? What are some strategies that you've seen them use that became an advantage for them?
I think that's there's probably three things that are commonalities. The first is knowing your own space and knowing your own routine, having and developing a routine that can be done in 2 minutes, because that's probably all you're going to have. So no matter what happens, you have a 2-minute routine that you can do before you step up on the block. So if you back up from take your mark, back up 2 minutes, they have a routine that they can do in that 2-minute time span, then it doesn't matter what else happens, they're going to be fine. Second is they are comfortable practicing perfection and striving for it. And they understand they're never going to get it, but they're going to work towards that. And then third, it's understanding that failure is part of the process. And I think that goes for whether it's coaches or athletes or anybody. I mean, crap, how many times have you failed over the course of the past 3 months? I mean, this pandemic is it's been every week I feel like I've done something that's total chaos or not right or something like that. And I dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it as much as I know I shouldn't. But then you have to reason yourself through it and figure out that that's part of the process, and realizing how to get through that failure. I mean, because this is unpredictable, and if I can grow from this, so can anybody. So, and that's what I think the best athletes do, is they realize that even if I have a terrible swim, it's where's my accountability and what can I do to improve from that?
Where's my accountability? What can I do to improve? Immediately after that bad swim is such a positive strategy in the face of adversity, right? When you have a jar that you can just do when you're in those moments and pull something out of that that's going to motivate you to go to the next thing.
Mhm.
What do you think some of the differences are coaching college level athletes and coaching club level athletes?
There's a lot of similarities, actually, because if you think about it, college athletes are really only a year out of being club athletes for the most part.
Right.
I think the biggest difference is that they are realizing for the first time that it's their sport at the college level. Whereas when you're swimming in club, there is still this feeling that it's your coach, your teammates, your parents, your brothers and sisters. Like there's all these other factors. When you go to college, a lot of it is you. And there's this element of team that is really important. And your freshman year, you don't totally feel it. But by the end of your sophomore year, you see the kids really start to figure out their team. So I always tell kids, don't think about transferring until after your sophomore year. Anybody who's like, because everybody feels like they want to go home. I would say 75% of athletes want to go home after the first semester of their freshman year. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. It's different. I don't like it. It's not working. I don't like my coach, whatever. But
Right.
I think if you can make it through that first year, you kind of go, okay, I kind of like this. By the end of your sophomore year, you've realized what team is, and it's really, really hard to leave. And you really want to be there forever because you start to do it not just, it's for yourself, but you realize how you are part of a greater goal and a greater existence. I know you've got a young lady at NC State. I do too. And I think that they do a great job there of really cultivating that environment and creating that environment of team. And they're not the only ones. Like there's a ton of programs that do a great job of doing that, but I know they stand out in that. And I might be a little biased.
They really value that swimming is fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for me, when I see Braden get so excited about things, that's why people want to swim there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's part of mental training, right? Part of mental training is the reminders that we do this to enjoy ourselves.
Oh yeah.
That the competitive aspect of it, though it can create anxiety at times, is what makes it so fun.
Yeah.
And you're gonna lose, and you're gonna lose a lot, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Like that's the tough times are what makes our sport great.
And I think you learn that importance of that loss when you go to college because you swim all those dual meets and you learn that a lot more than you do in like a high school setting. I think from a coaching perspective, there's things I liked about both. I loved coaching at NC State. I loved coaching at Northwestern. I thought those were awesome schools and awesome places to be a part of some really cool traditions. But being a part of that team environment is amazing. And that's part of why I like being at Nutria. I've said that before. Like there's this whole team environment that's a little unique to our program. But I also think that when you coach club, you create a really deep relationship with your athletes that you don't necessarily have when you coach college. And saying that, I definitely have college athletes that I still stay in touch with that we're friends on Facebook. I find out when their kids are when they have kids, I'm excited for them. I have athletes that are coaching that I coached at NC State that I stay in touch with. But for the bulk of it, the relationship you build at the club level as a coach is a very different relationship than you do at college. And that's kind of cool and special. I don't know. I get invited to more weddings of my club swimmers than I did of my college athletes, if that puts it in any type of perspective. So, because those are kids that I've coached from when they were 8, or they were on my team from when they were 8 to 18 or 24 or whatever. And that's it. You get to see them grow up. Like I have a girl that she's having her first baby, and I coached her when she was 8. And now she's 26, 25, 26, and she's having her first kid. And I'm like, okay, officially old. That's great. Cool. And I
Alexa,
feel like I wasn't that old when I coached her.
We've loved being poolside with you today. This has been such an awesome conversation. And as they always do, Coach's Corner, we start with a topic, and then we get into these deep dives on philosophy and coaching. And today it was just so interesting listening to your perspective on all the things that we're going through right now in our swimming community. We're going to announce that our Arena Carbon winner is Madeline Brain. Madeline Brain, you're going to win
congrats, Madeline.
That's awesome.
That's a win.
Alexa, if people want to get in touch with you and talk more about some of the stuff that we went over today, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, Instagram's usually pretty good. It's Coach Alexis Keto. Even though I don't totally get it, and I might not see your message for a long time, I promise I know it's there. Coach Alexis Keto is my handle for Twitter and for Instagram, and then coachketo@gmail.com is my non-work email, so you can get me there. So, and I'm more than happy to talk and whatever. Yep.
Well, thanks so much. I know I'm going to try to plan a trip out there sometime when this whole thing goes, and just spend some time on deck with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fun environment. I love our staff. I love our program. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alexis. We'll talk to you soon, and tune in next week at Monday at 3 o'clock for another edition of Coach's Corner. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.